Alright, hi everyone, welcome to class. Today we're going to be talking about the civil rights movement, specifically the trials and tribulations of black Americans during the 1960s. We're going to start by observing these three photographs right here, and we're discussing some of these to make further sense of it, and to make these figures known to you and why they are important, especially for this era regarding race. So we're going to start with this quote by John Lewis. I'm going to read the quote first. I'm going to give you a little bit about John Lewis to begin with. John Lewis was a civil rights leader in the 1960s. He walked in Selma with Martin Luther King. He participated in peaceful protests, and during peaceful protest, he was almost actually beaten completely to death. That's a real thing. He was almost beaten completely to death. He spoke about many times about how his life flashed before his eyes because he did, and his fight for freedom thought was going to end right then and there. John Lewis is now a congressman from Georgia. He has served for a very, very long time. So he's actually still politically active to this day. He's actually one of my favorite civil rights activists / leaders that I like to go to or look back to, specifically because of his leadership and how he is as a human being. This quote was one of my favorite quotes from him, and this is why it's hung up. It says, "If you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something about it." What could that mean to you? Does any student have something that could mean to them? Well, let's read the quote again. If you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something about it. It's right if you don't know why, but what do you think this is about?
Maybe if like someone's getting bullied.
If somebody's getting bullied, yeah. So you have
help them.
To help them, right? So that's good. That's exactly what you're on par with it. So basically what the statement is saying is that if you see something that you know that makes you feel like it's not good, that it's not something that should be the case, that you know that it's not fair, you can feel that, you have to do something about it. It's a moral obligation. If you don't, you're just as bad as the person causing the issue, because you're just being someone who's standing by. To be actively in the fight, you need to actively do something, and that's why John Lewis is an incredibly important figure. And like I said, he still serves in the U.S. Congress today. And then moving on to this photo or painting by Norman Rockwell. Before we get started on what it is about, I want you to look at it and tell me a few things about it. So tell me things you noticed in the painting.
I see a little girl that's black, and again, that's getting walked by a bunch of white, maybe cops or generals or something.
Okay. Yeah, no, you have it spot on. Now, do you know what time period this took place in? Could you take a guess at what year, almost, kind of thing?
1900s?
20th century, but 1900s, yes. Well, that was the same thing, I think. But yeah, 20th century mid, right? So this actually takes place during 1960, and the title of the painting is called "A Problem That We All Live With," and it's by Norman Rockwell. Now, depicted is Ruby Bridges. She's a 6-year-old girl who is being escorted to a formerly segregated school by 4 U.S. Marshals.
I watched a movie on that.
You watched the movie on it? Yeah. There's a movie on this, and it's actually incredibly heartbreaking. But the whole reason the painting is titled "The Problem We All Live With" is because this is a 6-year-old girl, as I've stated before, and she's being escorted by 4 U.S. Marshals to attend school. Now, have you in your lifetime ever faced an issue, something even close to the regards of attending school by 4 U.S. Marshals, at the thought that your safety was in danger?
No.
Well, it's not something that most students go through today, thank God, but some students in America do still go through versions of this, and not because of this kind of violence posed against them, but some students across America feel like they're out of place, or they're going to schools that don't necessarily represent them. Ruby Bridges was one of the first people to attend a segregated school to obviously make it unsegregated. And the picture is really important because it's painted by a white painter in the 60s who realizes that this is a problem we all live with because this shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be throwing tomatoes. We shouldn't be threatening violence against a 6-year-old child because they want an education. They want to better themselves, right? Or even just obtain the education. Education should be a right for all people. Now, how old is your grandma? How old's your grandma?
Like 57?
Like 57, right?
Yeah.
All right. Do you know how old she is?
6.
What?
6?
No. Oh, sorry. Now, do you think is she alive? Is she dead? How old is she?
She's alive. She's like 90 something.
She's alive. She's only 65 years old. She's only 65 years old. So what I'm trying to tell you by that is your grandmother, who is a 56-year-old woman, I mean, she's a grandmother, but you think that's old. This Ruby Bridge is only 65, and she faces discrimination in her lifetime, which was almost in your grandmother's lifetime. Very close, not very far apart. That's an incredible thing to think of. You think the past is so far away, but really it's just as close as you want it to be. And then finally, before we start the assessment part of this lesson, we're going to be talking about Gil Scott-Heron. Gil Scott-Heron is a famous civil rights poet. He wrote many poems about racial injustice and police enforcement. So quickly, I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to be asking all of you guys, all the listeners, to go on your phone, do some research on your own or your devices, and do some research on your own and tell me which one is, identify a civil rights leader, activist on your own. Basically what I'm telling you is you can look up civil rights activists. If you're into sports, you can say sports figures in civil rights. You can, if you're into writers like Gil Scott, what I'm going to say, you can look up writers in civil rights or politicians in civil rights. Anything that you think is of value to you or something that you can relate to yourself, look that up, and then I'm going to ask you to come up here and talk about that briefly. But go on Gil Scott-Heron. This is a poem he wrote in 1975. And though it's been too long and too many years have passed, and through the time has gone, the memories still hold fast. Yes, as strange as it seems, we still live in the past. The essence of black life lost in the hourglass. And ever since we have came to this land, this country has ruled the day. And we would stand as one and raise our voices and say, you know there won't be no more killings and no more talk of class. Your sons and your daughters won't die in the hourglass. A toast to David Walker. A toast to Martin King. A toast to all the leaders who had a golden dream. A toast to all black fathers who lived their lives in vain. A toast to all black mothers who shouldered this life in pain. A toast to people. That is airily painful to read, especially in the climate today, because unfortunately there has been more killings. There is racial injustice in the United States today, and someone like Gil Scott talking about this topic in 1975 is disturbing to hear that in some ways these things still exist. Those are a few things I shared about prominent civil rights moments and leaders, and right now I want you to find your own, and then come, once you're ready, we're going to be going up to the class and we're going to be discussing who we... Alright, so we're just about done with research. Does anybody want to volunteer to come up first and discuss who they picked and why? Ian, would you come up?
I picked Muhammad Ali because he was one of the best athletes in the world, yet he still fought for civil rights. He missed years in his prime because he was in prison because he didn't want to serve in the Vietnam War. He chose not to because of the racial injustice in America. He argued why he wouldn't go over there to fight the U.S.'s war when he was never faced discrimination for them. I choose him because of the sacrifices he made professionally to stand up for what he believes in. He used his status and his platform to speak up for people who couldn't in a time where those conversations weren't as welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for time. That's a very good example of a civil rights leader in a specific area of interest. Muhammad Ali was an incredible athlete. He was still renowned as one of the best boxers of his time, and he used his platform in a time where that wasn't particularly the normal thing to do or the right time to have those conversations, yet he had them time and time again, and he stood up for what he believed in time and time again. Muhammad Ali did pass away in 2016, unfortunately, but we actually do still take a lot of lessons away from him today, and Payne, that was a great example, so thank you. All right, next class we're going to be talking about civil rights. Again, we're going to be talking about some more important leaders during this time. Continue to do your own research, look up some of these people. There's a civil rights leader for any particular interest. These are important figures to know and to identify with, and to really make part with who you are, and understand their struggle and understand their fight. Thank you for participating today, and that's it. All right, we'll see you next class.